So obviously this is a bad peek.
Hit me for like 12 damage.
I did not mean to heal. Okay, whatever.
But is this a bad peek?
Need help.
Watch this.
Scanning ahead.
Hey, yo, it worked.
Well, many of you probably see this clip and think he got a kill, so it must have been a good peek, but actually, no, this is really, really bad right here. And a lot of you, I bet, are constantly doing stuff like this in your games, but just like this player, you don't really get punished for it in the moment, so that's why you don't even notice that you're doing something wrong. This is actually part of the reason why you'll hear a lot of higher ranked players say things like playing against better players is good for you, because they will punish you for things like this more frequently. Now, the reason this peek was actually bad, despite the player getting the kill, is because he actually strafes out from a very common angle for early duels while ADSing. We've talked before about the different speeds of movement in the game, but basically ADSing is one of the slowest ways you could possibly peek an angle, and because of this, he's giving the defender a major advantage in this duel. Like, look at this from the other player's perspective. Which one of these peeks do you think looks more intimidating? This one, or this one? You're probably thinking the second one, and I agree, but it gets a lot more complicated than that even, because honestly, even wide swinging this doesn't always mean it's a good peek, because realistically, a lot of this stuff is pretty situational. For example, I could think of situations where that very first peek we showed would actually be acceptable. It was a terrible idea in the moment for this round, but if maybe he knew the entire team was across the map, running through this area with his knife out isn't actually a terrible idea. He could take this space much faster. This is important to talk about when discussing the topic of what is a good peek, because what is a good peek in one moment might not be good in another. So just because I'd rather if our hero wide swung out of catwalk rather than walk peeking it, doesn't mean that it would be a good idea, say if he knew the enemy team had an operator. Don't get me wrong, wide swinging is still probably a lot better if they have an operator than what he did initially, but what will be even better than a wide swing would be a jump peek or even a shoulder peek to bait out that op shot. You'll see how all of these things change up given the situation. There are even situations where not peeking at all is the best peek. It really depends. We cover all of the nuances of this stuff over on the website, by the way. I've been working with a bunch of the coaches recently to bring you tons of new content. I even added so many really awesome courses just talking about angles and peeking angles in general, so I highly recommend checking these things out if you really want to bring your game to the next level. But for the purpose of this video, I really want to go more in depth on this VOD review and talk a lot more about the way that this player peeks angles, because I really do think there is a lot that we can learn from this game. For example, take a look at this clip.
3 people in one door, man. Just put a shot inside the corner.
Phoenix just...
I can...
So many times I see stuff like this, and it feels like players just chalk this up to their aim, but in reality, this is just a massive error in not only movement itself, but also this player's crosshair placement. Our Reyna is in the middle of nowhere when he peeks catwalk right here, and it causes him to have to land the craziest flick of his life to even have a chance in this duel. We get comments on videos all the time from players in lower ranks saying, "I'm bronze, but I have great crosshair placement," but the truth is, you don't. You just don't go back and watch your games to see how many times it's actually off. I had Max, one of our Radiant coaches, review this same VOD, and here's what he had to say for that play.
Is to stay alive more for other utility, like Sova, for example.
How do we use that side so hard? Put a shot inside.
Yeah, and then that comes down to crosshair placement. So we knew one was cat, so before you even swing, your crosshair should be adjusted. So I think
Now, obviously, he didn't say much different than what I said here, but what I want players to recognize is that this stuff sticks out like a sore thumb when watching players. You've probably all watched those videos where pro players try to guess viewers' ranks, and the reason many of these players can guess so accurately is because of very common mistakes like this. From watching this clip alone, I could tell you that this player is easily gold or below. The other thing besides crosshair placement though is, once again, this player doesn't really commit to the peek. He's sort of doing that slicing the pie thing that we've talked about, but without actually aiming his crosshair. It's just a really awkward peek. He doesn't need to necessarily wide swing this player, but like Max said, he knew one was catwalk, so he can't act surprised when he takes a duel here. If you know a player is in a certain location, if you're going to peek them, you need to peek them with confidence. Honestly, confidence plays into players' success in the game so much, and if you make the wrong decision with confidence, oftentimes you can get away with it. But I can tell you for certain, even if you're making the right decisions, if you don't do it with confidence, it can be incredibly easy to lose anyway.
Play slick, play fast, just don't die. If you die, you're trash.
No way, just don't die. Why didn't I think of that?
Moving over towards our last peek from our VOD review though, take a look at this round. Sometimes peeking out into the middle of Ascent can be pretty awkward, but you'll notice in this round, our Reyna is going to be getting pretty decimated. Now, there are two things to talk about here. The first is that you almost never want to peek angles by running forward if you can avoid it. Sometimes you need to hold W in Valorant, but for the most part, when you're actually peeking angles, you want to be very careful about holding W, as it can make you an incredibly easy target to hit since it slows down the movement speed at which you peek an angle. But the other thing to point out here is that it doesn't even seem like our Reyna is conscious of the angles that she's peeking. It may seem obvious after seeing how the round plays out, but keep in mind Reyna can isolate the catwalk angle from tiles. And because she can do this, the better way to approach this is to peek catwalk and confirm that no enemies are peeking you, and then after clearing catwalk, peek middle. Don't just run out into the open like our Reyna did. Remember, your ultimate goal when peeking is going to be to isolate your gunfights. Now, of course, the enemy could always peek you from catwalk, but clearing the angles one by one is going to work out for you so much better than just hoping your flash covers everything and holding W out into mid. Take a look at this round from one of our Smurf commentaries on the website. Notice how Jaden knows that there is a player on site and he doesn't actually know where this player is. This is when he goes for his peeks, methodically clearing all of the common angles that this player could be. First he checks back pillar, and then he checks between pillars, and then because he didn't see a player at either of those locations, he checks the angle close to him, confident that the player is holding him. Notice his crosshair placement throughout this entire process has him very prepared to take a duel. That's why when he peeks this Reyna on site, he's able to take her out so easily. Not to mention, when he takes these peeks, he's not shift walking into the peek. He quickly strafes to clear each angle. You compare this to the peeks that we saw from the Reyna in the last game, it's not even close in comparison. Jaden's even so confident in this peek that he literally pre-fires before he sees the Reyna. This is what I meant by it's night and day when you're watching the players. You can oftentimes easily get a good guess of what rank they are from just one or two clips. Let's take a look at one more round from Jaden though that showcases a couple of the things that we talked about today. The first I want to showcase is how he uses the Viper Wall and his cages to try and take peeks. Specifically, you'll notice how he strafes out of the Viper Wall, ready to take a duel with these players back site. Generally, when you push smokes, you want to peek them by strafing through them, just how Jaden does here. If you run directly through them while holding W, you're going to make yourself a really easy target, as the enemies will see your gun and arms far before you see them. This is very similar to the concept that we talked about earlier, how holding W when peeking can really hurt you. By strafing through these smokes, you sort of hide your gun and make sure you move as quickly through the smoke as possible to take these duels. But also notice how later in the round, Jaden has the discipline to know when not to push these smokes. You'll see how he drops both of his cages, and rather than sprinting straight through these like any other player would in this rank, he actually just fires off a few right clicks and backs out. He knows that peeking through these cages would be a bad peek. He'd have to peek by running straight through them, and he knows that players are holding him. It would easily result in his death, despite the fact that he is a Radiant player who's playing versus Platinums in this game. Being a higher rank doesn't mean that you'll win every single gunfight that you take. It means that you'll make better decisions in your games that will result in you winning more gunfights. You'll notice after backing out though, how he doesn't just tuck himself in the corner. He's constantly jiggling out from cover and looking to take shots on the players who are pushing him. Backing yourself into a corner is one of the easiest ways to die while being pushed, and Jaden knows this. That's why he takes these peeks. Lastly, take a look at this kill on the flanking Phoenix. This is just an example of really excellent crosshair placement. When he peeks the angle, the enemy is exactly where he's aiming, and he's able to throw in a quick right click for the kill. Overall though, this was an excellent round from Jaden, and I think it does a really good job of emphasizing many of the things that we talked about in this guide. As always though, remember, if you're looking to catch either the VOD review from Max or the Smurf commentary from Jaden, both of these things are available in full on our website. All of the content on the site is also backed by our rank improvement guarantee, so it's literally no risk. So if you're looking for the fastest way to improve at Valorant, be sure to head down to the description below and check out SkillCapped.com. As always though, my name is King, and we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.